Genesis 32, verse 28. A man is given a new name at dawn. That name becomes the identity of an entire nation, but the Hebrew word behind it has never meant what most people were taught. Here is what is odd. The verb used to explain the name, Sarah, appears only twice in the entire Hebrew Bible, and scholars have noted for centuries that the explanation in the verse does not actually match the structure of the name itself. In this reading, the renaming at the Jabbok corresponds to an inner identity shift. The text maps the moment the old self, Yaakov, the heel grabber, is replaced by something the Hebrew calls Yisra'el, and the meaning changes depending on which route you follow. The proof is in the consonants. Jacob, Jabbok, and the word for wrestling share the same letter pattern. The text made the man, the river, and the struggle sound identical on purpose. We are going to walk verse by verse through the Hebrew of Genesis 32. The triple wordplay. The word naga, which means touched, not struck. The euphemism hiding inside yarekh. The spelling shift between Peniel and Penuel. And the sinew of forgetting. By the end, you will have the Hebrew architecture of this passage and a 3 to 5 minute practice built from the phrase Jacob spoke at dawn. I will not let you go unless you bless me. But before any name changes, something has to break first. Look at verses 22 through 24. Jacob sends his 2 wives across the Jabbok, his 2 servants, his 11 children, everything he owns. The text uses 2 separate sending verbs. First, he sends the family across, then he sends everything he had. The stripping is deliberate, the text wants you to feel it. And then one line, Vayavater Yaakov levado. And Jacob was left alone. That word levado is emphatic, alone, completely. Every external marker of identity removed. Family, wealth, servants, livestock, all on the other side of the water. 20 years of accumulation, gone across the ford in a single verse. You know this feeling. That season when everything you built around yourself is suddenly on the other side of something, and what is left is just you, in the dark, with no title, no role, no audience. The text puts Jacob there before the encounter even begins. Then an ish, a man, wrestles him. Not a malach, not an angel. The Genesis text never uses that word. That identification comes later, from Hosea. The text says a man, and the wrestling lasts the entire night. Ad alat hashachar, until the ascending of the dawn. Jacob is alone, it is dark, and an unnamed figure has engaged him. But before the name changes, something has to break first, and the Hebrew word for what happens next does not mean what you were taught. Your Bible probably says the man struck Jacob's hip, or wrenched it, or injured it in a fight. That is not what the Hebrew says. Verse 25, vayiga. This is the call form of naga, Strong's H5060. Every Hebrew lexicon agrees. In the call stem, naga means to touch, to make contact, even to barely touch. Robert Alter, one of the most respected Hebrew translators alive, writes that naga in the call conjugation always means to touch, even to barely touch. This was not a strike, it was a touch. And then the result, vateka, from yaqa, H3363, to be wrenched out of joint, to be dislocated, to be alienated from its socket. This verb occurs only 8 times in the entire Hebrew Bible. The strongest joint in the human body, undone by contact so light, the text calls it a touch. Think about the implication. A being who can dislocate the hip with a fingertip of contact could have ended this wrestling match in the first minute. The whole night was allowed. The struggle was permitted. The touch came only when it was time for the struggle to change form. You have felt something like this. Not physical. A sentence someone said to you. A quiet realization at 2 in the morning. Something that barely grazed you and dislocated everything you thought was stable. The text uses the gentlest verb for the most devastating result. The same verb naga appears when a seraph touches Isaiah's lips with a coal in Isaiah 6 verse 7. When the angel touches Elijah to wake him in 1 Kings 19 verse 5. Same word, same divine contact pattern. Each time, a light touch produces a total shift. Now look at verse 26. The figure says, shalesheni, release me, for the dawn has ascended. The Hebrew verb for the dawn arriving is Allah, to go up, to ascend. The same verb used for ascending Mount Sinai. The same verb used for offerings that rise. Dawn does not break in Hebrew, it rises. And notice what the figure does not do. He does not explain the urgency. He does not say why the dawn matters. The text leaves that gap wide open. All you know is that whatever this encounter is, it belongs to the night. The dawn ends it. Jacob, now wrestling with a dislocated hip, says no. Lo ashaleshachaki imberachthani. I will not release you unless you bless me. The verb barach means both to bless and to kneel. Jacob demands the blessing from a position of total physical weakness, not strength, weakness. And the figure does not overpower him. The one who could dislocate a hip with a touch does not simply leave. Jacob's grip from ruin somehow holds. The text never explains why. Now you know the verb. It was a touch, not a blow. But the sight of that touch, what your English Bible translates as thigh, carries a meaning that Strong's Concordance states plainly, but almost no sermon has ever named. Verse 25 again. Vayiga b'kaph yarekh. He touched the kaph of his yarekh. Your translation says the hollow of his thigh. Let us look at what the Hebrew actually says. Yarekh, Strong's H3409. The standard definition reads, and this is a direct quote from Strong's, the thigh, from its fleshy softness, by euphemism, the generative parts. By euphemism, the generative parts. This is not obscure information. It is printed in the concordance, but you have probably never heard it taught. The English says thigh, and you picture the upper leg. The Hebrew points to the generative center of the body. The cross references confirm it. Genesis 24, verse 2. Abraham tells his oldest servant to put your hand under my yarekh and swear an oath. This is not a handshake. This is an oath sworn on the seat of procreation, the place where the covenant promise of a future nation physically resides. And Genesis 46, verse 26. All the persons who came out of his yarekh, his descendants. The word is a euphemism, and the cross references prove it. Now the other word, kaph, H3709, it means palm, hollow, sole, socket. The same word used for the open receiving palm of a hand is used here for the concave cup of the hip socket. One Hebrew word connects the gesture of receiving with the bone structure that holds the body's deepest joint in place. The text hammers this compound. Kaph yarekh appears 4 times in verses 25 and 32. 4 times. The hollow of the generative center. The receiving socket of the place where the future is produced. When the text repeats a phrase 4 times in 8 verses, it is telling you where to look. This is correspondence, not medical claim. Map, not prescription. We are decoding a text, not prescribing a treatment. In this reading, the touch at the kaph of the yarekh corresponds to something making contact with the generative seat. The place where drive and desire and the capacity to produce the future all originate. The touch did not destroy it. It displaced it, loosened it from the socket that held it locked in position. You know what it feels like when the thing that drove you, the ambition or the hunger or the plan you built your identity around, suddenly goes slack. Not by violence, not by failure, just by something precise making contact with the exact right point. And the whole structure that held your old life together quietly comes apart. That is what this verb and this location describe together. A touch at the generative center that ungrasps the part of you that was holding on the hardest. Now you know what was touched and why the English hid it. But the name change, the entire reason for this encounter, has not landed yet. And the Hebrew behind the name Yisra'el is far stranger than the explanation the verse gives. This is the peak. Everything in this passage points here. Verse 27. The figure asks Jacob a question. Ma shemeka, what is your name? The last time Jacob was asked that question was Genesis 27, verse 18. His father Isaac asked, "Who are you, my son?" And Jacob lied. He said, "I am Esau." He stole the blessing by speaking a false name. Here at the Jabbok, alone, hip dislocated in the dark, he tells the truth. Yaakov, heel grabber, supplanter, deceiver, the name he was given at birth for grabbing his brother's heel on the way out of the womb. That is the confession. You cannot receive a new name until you speak the old one out loud. You have felt this, the moment where you finally stopped performing the version of yourself that everyone expects, and you said what you actually are. The text gives Jacob that exact moment at the threshold of dawn. Verse 28. Lo Yaakov, yamer od shimcha ki im Yisra'el. Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Yisra'el. Ki sarita im Elohim ve'im anashim vatuchal. For you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. The verb is sarita, from Sarah, H8280. Strong's defines it as to persist, to exert oneself, to persevere. This verb appears only twice in the entire Hebrew Bible. here and in Hosea 12 verse 4, nowhere else in all of Scripture. It is functionally unique to Jacob. But here is what almost nobody outside of academic scholarship knows. Nahum Sarna of the JPS Torah Commentary and Robert Alter both state plainly that the folk etymology in verse 28 does not match the morphological structure of the name Yisra'el. The verbal form Sarah does not straightforwardly yield Yisra as a prefix. The explanation the text gives is literary. It is theological. It is not linguistic. And there are at least 4 competing roots for the name. Sarah plus El, he who strives with God. That is the traditional reading from this verse. Yashar plus El, God makes straight. The letters Sin and Shin were not distinguished in early Hebrew writing. The poetic name Jeshurun in Deuteronomy comes from this same root, Yashar. Yaakov means crooked, the heel grabber who deceives. Yisra'el means God straightens, the crooked one is made upright. Sar plus El, Prince of God. The KJV reflects this. As a prince hast thou power with God. The noun Sar means ruler or chief, and Philo of Alexandria, writing in the 1st century, read it as Yisra'el, the one who sees God, not struggle, vision. Philo wrote that by the breath of divine inspiration, God changes ears into eyes. And Hosea 12 verse 3 retells this event and adds 2 details Genesis never mentions. He wept, and he made supplication. The wrestling was not merely physical. It involved something much deeper. The name is not closed, it is layered. The text gives one explanation, and the language holds at least 4. The man who grabbed the heel becomes the one who persists with God, or the one God makes straight, or the Prince of God, or the one who sees God face to face. Now add the triple wordplay. Yaakov, Yabboq, yarekh, Jacob, Jabbok, wrestled. All 3 words share the same consonant cluster. Labial, guttural, kaph. Gordon Wenham paraphrased verse 25 as he Decoded him. The man, the river, and the action became one sound before the text gave them a new one. And Jabbok itself, from bakak, means pouring out. The site of the transformation is named emptying. You are emptied at the place called emptying. You are renamed at the moment you confess your old name. In this reading, the name shift from Yaakov to Yisra'el corresponds to the transition from a grasping, reactive identity to one shaped by direct encounter. The heel grabber becomes the one who faces God. This is correspondence, not medical claim. Map, not prescription. We are decoding a text, not prescribing a treatment. The name has landed. But the passage has 2 more details nobody discusses. The place name that changes spelling between one verse and the next, and the Sinew, whose Hebrew name means to forget. 2 threads are still open. The generative center from verse 25, and the name that just changed in verse 28. The passage ties them together in its final 3 verses. Verse 30, Jacob names the place Peniel, with a yod vowel, panim plus El, face of God. He says, I have seen Elohim, panim el panim, face to face, and my nefesh, my life is preserved. The verb is natsal, to be delivered from mortal danger. Jacob expected to die. Exodus 33, verse 20 says, no man shall see me and live. Jacob's astonishment is not the name change, it is that he survived. You have had this. The moment after the encounter when you realize you are still here, still breathing. You expected the thing that changed you to destroy you, and it did not. Verse 31. The narrator writes the name again, but now it is Penuel, with a vav vowel instead of a yod. Every other occurrence in the Hebrew Bible uses Penuel. Judges 8, 1 Kings 12, 1 Chronicles 4, always Penuel. The Masoretes preserved both spellings side by side in consecutive verses. They chose not to harmonize them. Some scholars suggest the spelling shift mirrors the identity shift. Jacob speaks one form. The narrator, after the transformation, writes another. The place name transforms alongside the man. Even the ground you stand on gets a different name after the encounter changes you. Now verse 32, the sinew, gid hanasheh. Gid means sinew or tendon. Nasheh, HV 384, occurs only here. It comes from the root nashah, which carries 2 meanings, to be displaced and to forget, the sinew of forgetting. This single verse created a living dietary law. The children of Israel do not eat the sinew of the hip to this day. One man's body encounter at a river crossing became inscribed in the eating practices of an entire nation. Jewish law identifies it as the sciatic nerve. The Talmud devotes an entire chapter to it, Tractate Chulin, chapter 7. You know what it is to carry something in your body that your mind decided to stop remembering. a tension you have held so long it became invisible. The text names a sinew after forgetting, and then commands an entire nation never to consume it. As if to say, do not feed on the thing that made you numb to where you were touched. And the word for limping, solea, from tsala, shares its root with tsela, the rib or side taken from Adam in Genesis 2. The same root connects the first separation in the garden to Jacob's altered walk at the river. Then, Genesis 33 verse 10. The morning after, Jacob meets Esau and says to see your face is like seeing the face of God. The word panim links Peniel to the brother's face. The divine encounter and the human reconciliation share one word. The face of God at night becomes the face of the brother at dawn. The naga at the generative center displaced what was locked. The name change replaced what was confessed, and the sinew of forgetting marks the place where the body remembers what the mind tried to release. 3 threads from 3 chapters, 1 passage. The limp is the mark. Transformation that costs you nothing, changes nothing. The text gives Jacob a permanent alteration to his walk. He crosses into the new name carrying visible evidence that the encounter was real. The text gave Jacob a new name, a permanent wound, and a sinew the nation would never eat again. One question remains. What do you do with this at dawn? No new decode here, just the phrase Jacob spoke in verse 26. Lo ashaleshakaki imberachtani. I will not release you unless you bless me. Here is the practice. It takes 3 to 5 minutes. First, sit in stillness for 2 minutes. Name silently the one thing you are wrestling with, the pattern, the identity, the habit that will not resolve. Do not try to fix it. Hold it. Second, speak one sentence to it, not a prayer formula, just a direct, honest line. I am not letting go until this resolves. This mirrors Jacob's refusal to release. He held on through the entire night with a dislocated hip. Third, sit for 1 more minute. Let the dawn, whatever clarity arrive on its own timing. You do not manufacture it. The practice is not about winning, it is about not releasing. One more option if you want to go deeper. The figure asked Jacob a question in verse 27. Ma shemeka, what is your name? Ask yourself that question. Not your given name, the pattern you operate under, the identity you default to. Name it. Say it out loud. Jacob had to say Yaakov, supplanter, before the new name could be given. You say the old name first, then you wait for the dawn.